there, and welcome to the Chrissy Miles Show. I am your host, Chrissy Miles. I am so excited that you're joining me this evening as we meet one of our great guest speakers at the Get More Out of Life Women's Conference that's coming up this May. So please, without further ado, allow me to introduce you to my great friend, Tina Konkin. Hi, Tina.
Hey, Chrissy. Good to see you from afar. I'm way up north in Canada.
All right. You're up in Canada, probably visiting family.
I am. My grandkids.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I just wanted to take an opportunity to introduce you a little bit to our audience. Now, we have a lot of people that have seen you at a couple of our marriage retreats and seminars over the years, but maybe for those people who have never had a chance to meet you, tell us a little bit about yourself and your ministry.
Well, many years ago, they say, I'm a counselor by trade, and they say we're the most messed up ones, right? So
second that to pastors.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe so. But we get into the field usually because we've struggled, or
Sure.
We've seen firsthand how a marriage could go south and how parenting can go south. And that's how it started with me, was first the parenting thing. And wow. My daughter was only 8 years old, and I started looking for help because I began to reject her. I began to push her away. I wasn't nurturing anymore. And she just seemed to bug me all the time. And she was only 8 years old. So I knew enough as a counselor that I was the problem, not her. But that didn't help in any way resolve the issues inside. And I remember Chrissy going to a counselor, a Christian counselor, and he tried to help, but he was trying to get into my past. Now, one thing, I grew up in the church, and I always heard that the past is behind you and you're to press forward, So I knew how to quote scripture. So I quoted it to the counselor, and I said, I don't think this is biblical that we're going into my past. That was laid down at the cross. And he goes, well, I could see that's working for you. And he said, let me know, when you actually want to work on this. And I said, I'm just working on the feelings I have towards a little girl that doesn't deserve these feelings. So anyways, I went 3 times. He still wanted to get into my mother issues and my parent issues and all my other issues. And I thought, no, they're nailed at the cross, being real religious, Yeah. And that's where it really started. And another year went by, and then I realized, and I did every spiritual thing I knew to do, like short of casting out demons.
Right.
Because it was getting so bad that I couldn't even hug her. And my heart was breaking for her. And yet it was this overwhelming feeling that I couldn't nurture her. And so it was about a year later that my sister started noticing some things. And my little girl at that time, which she would have been close to 10 now, said, why does my mommy love my brother and not me? So now she was picking up on it, Sure. And that's my real heart, is for anybody listening. Don't let that bring shame to you. But understand that we do put out those things that we think we're hiding.
Now, would you have said at this time in your marriage with you and Ron, were you guys having some trouble then as well?
No, or that's actually when the trouble started. When he when he felt like he was in the middle of his daughter, and he goes, you need help, right? And when he saw that the counseling didn't work, then that started, a whole other thing. But he also saw how hard I worked, at trying to resolve it. But it was then, and then the marriage started to decline, just because, I had all these excuses, and though he knew I was trying, it wasn't good enough. His little girl was getting hurt, and his mother was dying. So all that going on, he kind of leaned on someone else. And that's
and how long had you been married at that time, would you say, roughly?
Probably about between 12 and 14 years, somewhere in there.
When you work with people, do you often find that there is a window of time like that? I mean, sometimes you kind of hear about this 7-year itch thing. Do you find that?
There is. It's usually in the first 3 years.
Okay.
That's usually when the initial. And then after that, I think life gets busy. Usually people start having children, work, mortgages, and it seems to kind of taper off where they're just doing life, but they're not connecting. And so if they don't come, if there's not something that they fixed in that first 3 years, then it continues. And then 7 to 10 years is a big period. And then believe it or not, it happens again then when the children are about to leave, that high school age and the midlife and all the rest of that.
Sure.
But for me, it was more, I don't think we were in any one of those periods. It was more the rejection of my daughter that sort of started bringing resentment into Ron's heart. So again, those, I talk about the hardness of the heart, which you often hear me talk about. And that Jesus really said, it's not adultery. It's not anything that we think.
Right.
On marriage. When they asked him, and I found this interesting because that's what healed our marriage. When we recognized that Jesus' answer to the Pharisees to the question, Moses allowed divorce. What do you say? And he never negated the right to divorce. He just said Moses allowed divorce because of the hardness of the heart. Wow. And then he brings in that adultery thing, but you recognize that Jesus also is basically saying most people don't get over the hardness of the heart when there's been betrayal.
Wow.
But if you can get over the hardness of the heart, then nothing stops it from restoring or from being connected in the first place. Because Jesus said it wasn't so in the beginning.
Right.
Relationships were not intended with hardness of heart. And so when we began to check out our hardness of heart, for Ron, it started with that resentment. Of being in the middle of protecting his children and me, Right. And when he saw that I wasn't moving, like it wasn't moving and it was just getting worse. And it was about at the 2-year mark that we found the Dr. Phil program, which is an experiential program. And that's when everything changed for us in our marriage, in my raising the kids. It was a 5-day intensive and our lives changed forever.
Now in that period, in that period, you had discovered that Ron had an affair. Is that correct?
No. So in the rejection period is when the hardness of heart really started. I went and got help for the parenting.
Got it.
But we never worked on the marriage. Ron tried to work on the marriage after that because he was holding on to all this resentment. And I just figured, and then his mom started dying. And again, I went into non-nurture mode.
Wow.
So that's when the affair really happened. It was a second bout. Now I was not nurturing him, which I'd never nurtured him before anyways. So that was not uncommon for him, but for the first time in our marriage, and it was about 14 years at that point, for the first time in our marriage, he needed me and I wasn't there. And I actually knew I couldn't be there for him. And I asked my closest friend, I said, look, I don't do death really well. And he's shutting down, he's withdrawing. I don't know what to do, and I said, he's not talking. And, I'd say to him, look, you got to go see your mom. I was barking out orders. Right. You got to go see your mom. Like, yeah, so what? It's an 8-hour drive. Get going. Then I'd buy him plane tickets to go see his mom. And I would just see him withdrawing and he didn't want to go see her. He didn't want to face, right? Mm-hmm. And he was, the golden child. He was the youngest and all that. But I was just the obligation thing, but no nurture. So when I asked my friend, that's when the nurturing happened. And that's when they both kind of connected. And it was short term, it was short lived, but it was the worst thing, because it was a real, something that came out of left field.
Sure.
And I've got to say our marriage was not in trouble at that point. But over the years, between the rejection, between some of the other things we didn't fix in the first 3 to 4 years, right, those things build up.
Right.
And so I had resentment. He had resentment. I had a lot of anger. That was my rock of choice.
Wow.
And so when I was able to uncover those rocks, going through these programs and then going to a marriage program after, again, experiential, we didn't go to counseling. We found a 4-day program out in Texas and went to that for our marriage. uh,
Mm.
2 years after the first program, but this one's specific to marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And that was when we trained actually with that program and started what we used to call the boot camps. And now we call them Lifeline. And that's sort of what you guys experienced the mini of when I've come and done mini conferences there. But as you remember, Chrissy, you know, having experienced it on a mini level, not the full extensive, that I don't deal necessarily with the relationship.
Right. And I think that that's an interesting thing to talk about, because I think there's probably a misnomer. And of course, as pastors, we deal with people all the time that have marriage issues. And so many times they try to come in and fix the marriage.
Right.
And it's like, if their relationship with the Lord is not working, and they have these rocks, like you mentioned, and the hardness of heart in any area whatsoever against anybody, the marriage really is not going to get fixed or solved, you know, if you could even put it that way.
It's totally true. And the other thing that we uncover for them that I think is why the program, and why when I've, you know, been able to share at women's conferences, why there's so much healing involved, is because it takes the blame off. I'm the problem in the marriage, or you're the problem in the marriage. It takes blame out of it, and it takes shame out of it, because we do go back. That first counselor, you know, that wanted to go into my past, he was basically saying, until you're willing to look at what's not resolved from your past. So when Jesus talks about, or the Apostle Paul talks about, you know, you're the Bible scholar, the Apostle Paul talks about leaving our past behind and pressing forward. That doesn't mean denying the past. It means you've resolved the things of the past. You know, you've left them behind, because they're not supposed to be part of our day, present, and future.
Right. Yeah, and think about the Apostle Paul too, in the sense that he had gone away for so many years after he received this revelation. I mean, he was gone for, I think some scholars say, up to 14 years, gone from his normal life.
Yeah.
And I think that there was a lot of things about his life that he really had to deal with the Lord. And you can tell that there was a major shift in him when he came back and he started ministering for a second time after having worked out a lot of those things. That's interesting.
Right. And having to work out his past and what he had done, and the shame that must have carried, you know, and what other apostle is the apostle of grace? None like the Apostle Paul, because much was forgiven of him, you know. And so for me, it's helping couples, but mostly individuals, go back and see those things, the anger that wasn't resolved, that maybe you have against your father, or that teacher, or that rapist, or you think you've nailed it at the cross, you know, but you haven't really resolved it. The kid hasn't resolved it. Maybe the mind has resolved it, but not the heart.
Yeah, that's good.
The hardness of the heart is in the heart. Right? Whereas our mind said, look, that was in the past. I have to let it go. But the heart is still hurting, because maybe the heart is still 10 years old.
Right. That's a really good point.
So, you know, and as a counselor, we know that whatever points of trauma that you've had in the past, you don't emotionally grow past that. So if you were 10 when you were molested, you're still there when it comes to sexual issues, right? So if you're bringing that into the marriage, and intimacy is a problem, well, do you wonder why? If that hasn't been resolved, right? So that's sort of, and it can be simple things. Like for me, it wasn't, even though, you know, I had some of that happen to me in the sexual realm, that wasn't so much my issue as much as it was acceptance, because I was so rejected as a child that if your own parents reject you, how do you expect a stranger to love you, right? Or trust that they won't leave you.
Right.
So we help people experience that through their own storyboard, through their own experience, not through, you know, just saying you got to forgive your mom, or you got to forgive this person. We all know that, especially if we've grown up in the church. It's the how to. And I couldn't forgive my mom.
Right.
Mom. I had to forgive her as a 16-year-old girl that was rejecting an unwanted pregnancy. Now that's easy to forgive, but
Right.
all those years in the church, I was trying to forgive a mom.
Yeah.
And mom shouldn't do that.
Yeah, that's
Right?
good.
Mom shouldn't say you should have never been born. So that's who I was trying to forget. I was trying to forgive an adult, right?
Right.
And on the topic of forgiveness, I just want to throw this out there. And Ron taught me that. I'm a widow today. And, Ron died about 7 years ago. And I'll never forget the best lesson I ever learned on forgiveness, because I bet you we're all in the ministry, all guilty of this. It's like, what's the first question we ask? Are we condoning what they've done? And the answer is no. Are we making an excuse for what they've done? And the answer is no. And he showed me something new. He said, well, Jesus made an excuse for them. And I said, you can't make an excuse for what people do that's wrong. You have to forgive. And he goes, I don't know, remember the cross? And I said, yeah. He goes, with his hands. And we just had Easter. He says, with the nails in his hands, he said, Father, forgive them. But he didn't end it there.
Right.
He said, because they don't know what they're doing.
Sure. Wow.
And he said, that's the biggest excuse. They were adults. They beat him. Yeah. They put a crown of thorns on his head. They gave him vinegar to drink. They pierced him. And yet he's saying, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Not to forgive them because you're God.
Right.
Right. But because honestly, look at them.
Yeah.
You really think they know what they're doing. And that to me, then I thought, now that puts forgiveness on a different, because how many parents or how many teachers really know, did I really know what I was doing?
Yeah.
I knew I was harming her, but I didn't know how to stop.
Sure. Right.
Right.
Wow. So that's good. Well, let me introduce people to the conference here real quick. I'll play just a short video for you all. If you haven't been familiar with our conferences in the past, enjoy. Let's see here. Maybe. Here we go.
And wondered, where do I go from here? Then join us May 14th and 15th in South Bend, Indiana for the Get More Out of Life Women's Conference. Now more than ever, faithful women must listen to the inner voice of God to find direction in unstable times. God's women must navigate the changing cultural tides like never before to provide sanctuaries for their families and tackle problems head-on before they start. When you attend the Get More Conference, you'll become refocused on God's direction for your life with support from women like you. Joining us are guest speakers Chrissy Miles, Tina Konkin, and Dr. Dion Arsenault. Learn to experience an abundant life, even when the world seems to be falling apart. Reclaim your joy and passion and turn the corner towards a better future. Save the date, May 14th and 15th, South Bend, Indiana. Registration is now live. Visit.
All right.
All right. I'm so excited.
Yes, I am too. So just, to recap, even though you deal so much in marriage and relationships, this is really a conference where individuals can come and
ChrissyMiles.com for more.
Would you say that that's correct?
I would. And like I said, though if you look me up or whatever, it looks like I'm a big relationship expert and, I deal with relationships, but really the relationship I deal most with is the relationship you have with yourself and how you present yourself in other relationships. Parenting, spouse, friend, because you show up the same person. It's just, it hurts more people that you're closer to if the rocks are there.
Wow, that's great. Well, I just want to encourage you all to register for the conference. If you have not done so yet, tickets are still available. I will say, however, that we do have a limited number of seats available, but we are at a little bit of a larger venue than what we have normally been at. So there are still plenty of seats available, but you want to make sure you get your tickets soon. You can go to ChrissyMiles.com. and you can register there. You can also register on our social media pages, and then make sure you also click the link for the special hotel rate if you're coming in from out of town. We have a special guest rate at the Aloft Hotel in downtown South Bend. So Tina, thank you so much for joining us, and we are so excited to host you in May. We can't wait. It's going to be a great time.
Perfect.
We will see you soon.
God bless.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.